The AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Exam Guide is the heart and soul of your strategy for the exam. Let's take a look at some of these key concepts here. So to start with, the exam is going to cover and make sure that you understand what the cloud really is. And do you understand the concept of a global infrastructure? And this is a really important concept. So if we have a globe here, you're going to have data centers in the United States, you're going to have data centers in Europe, you're going to have data centers in Australia, right? And this is the concept here, is that you have many different resources that you can utilize. You're also going to need to know some basic cloud architectural principles, and we're going to get into these. And some of these include elasticity, fault tolerance. These are all key architectural principles, and the value proposition, and really a big value proposition for the AWS cloud that we'll get into in more detail, is this concept of comparative advantage. Really good example is, let's take a popular basketball player like Steph Curry. Should he be mowing his lawn, or should he be working on strength and conditioning and three-point shooting? Well, he's going to make millions of dollars per year as a basketball player, so that's where he should spend his free time. If we look at some of the key services on the AWS platform, there's another one is, do you understand the difference between compute and analytics and storage, for example? These are all really important key considerations here. Now, if we go into security, that's another concept that it can really trip people up, is, do you understand the shared security model? And really briefly, let me talk about that. What it means is that AWS is responsible for the data center, so the physical hardware. They're going to make sure people don't break into it and physically steal hardware, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you configure applications to be secure. In terms of billing, account management, and pricing models, this is another one to be aware of. Do you understand how they work? And also, do you know how to get documentation, and do you know how to get technical assistance, right? White papers, support tickets, and then also, do you understand the basic core characteristics of deploying and operating in the AWS cloud? So a good example of this would be a website. Do you understand how a website works? And also, do you understand how to deploy a website? And we're going to go through these things in later lessons. Now let's talk about the recommended AWS knowledge. It is recommended that you have at least 6 months of experience with the AWS cloud, and also that you have some technical, managerial, sales, purchasing, or financial experience. So this could mean that you were at a company and your company used AWS cloud. But let me tell you, the shortcut here is that really you can shrink this if you practice using some techniques I'm going to show you later. Can you actually accelerate the amount of time it takes to understand the basics of the cloud? And you absolutely can. Now, also general IT knowledge is important. So do you know how Gmail works? Do you understand how a computer works? These are the kind of general IT knowledge that will help you when you're looking through some of the material. Also, in terms of exam preparation, there's some free training here from AWS, and it's always a good idea to look at the official material, because this is going to help you out. And then this is probably the biggest one that they give you a hint on is, did you actually read the white paper? And let's put yourself into the mindset of someone writing this exam. If you're going to be writing an exam question, wouldn't you think that the white papers that are referenced would be the best reference material to use? So you can absolutely count on the fact that these white papers are going to be referenced in exam questions. And if you haven't read them, you're going to have a lot of trouble understanding some of the questions. But if you had, you're going to put yourself in the best possible situation. So big takeaway here is that you absolutely want to read the white papers. Okay, so what's next here? Let's talk about the different kinds of questions on the exam. And this is another one that can trip you up. Most people are familiar with a basic multiple choice, right? There's one correct answer. There's many that are not correct. That one's not that bad. You can use process of elimination. What's more difficult is when you have two or more correct responses. And in this situation, you're going to need to know the differences between services. So let's take storage, for example. Do you understand the difference between S3 and EBS? We're going to absolutely go into this in more detail later, but that's a good example. Is if you don't know all the differences between S3 and EBS, and they ask you a question about how to compare one system with another, you're going to have trouble with a multiple response question. So these are designed to really catch people that haven't gone through and read all the white papers and haven't gone through and played around with the services. So if we go through here and we look at the score as well, you're going to need to score at least 70% to pass the exam. And finally, let's look at the domain here. So we have a breakdown of, in terms of cloud concepts, you have 28%, or about a third is going to be cloud concepts. Security, 25%, about a third is technology, and a very small amount on billing and pricing. Let's break down these concepts here. Cloud concepts, do you understand the value proposition? Again, microeconomics will be a huge factor here. Do you understand how to identify the aspects of the cloud economics? So economies of scale, for example, why is it that you can buy something at Walmart for much cheaper than you can buy at your local grocery store? Because they have better pricing, because they can buy in bulk. Also, what about the different cloud architecture design principles? Again, we talked about that earlier: fault tolerance, scalability, elasticity. These are all principles that we'll talk about, and then list the different cloud architecture design principles as well. Finally, let's be able to understand security, the shared security model. They're going to be responsible for the physical data center. They're going to be responsible for the parts that they maintain, and depends on what service you use, how much you're going to be responsible for. If you use higher level services, they'll be responsible for more. So a good example is serverless, which we'll get into. They're responsible for a lot more because they actually maintain the infrastructure. What about AWS cloud security and compliance concepts? That's another one. The IAM system, which we'll cover later, is how to set up roles and groups and users. And this is a really important concept that you'll master later. And then technology. So do you understand how to deploy and operate things in the cloud? Do you understand, again, this concept of a global infrastructure where you have data centers all over the world that are interconnected? Do you understand about availability zones? Also, do you understand the core AWS services? And again, core services that we'll get into will be things like CPU or compute. We'll also talk about storage, networking. These are all concepts that we'll cover in more detail, but you need to know. And then, do you understand how to get support? Do you know how to file support tickets, billing and pricing? Can you compare the different billing and pricing models, recognize various account structures, and identify resources for billing support? So again, with billing and pricing, a big one to take away as well is think about a car that you can rent from Enterprise. Maybe it's $75 a day, but if you buy it, maybe the monthly payment is only $300 a month. And so which one's more expensive? Well, it depends on how often you're going to use it. And also there's concepts of a spot price. And a spot price would be like using a car for only, let's say, 1 hour. Maybe over 1 hour, it's only $5. And for that 1 hour, you got a great deal. So it really depends on the kind of service you're using, but it's important to understand these different types of pricing.